All right, in this video, we are going to give another example of implementing the model view controller pattern. In this case, it's going to be basically a drawing app. You can find this on the repository in Bitbucket under Paint App Start project. And in that project, it's only the view and the controller are implemented. In the Paint app project, the complete model view controller setup is implemented. Okay, so let's run this so you can get an idea of what it does. It's just a very basic drawing app. Right here, over on the left side of the app, you have a color picker, and you can pick some colors. And then you over here, if you hold down the left mouse button, you can drag and draw pictures over here. So, right, and so right, you can draw pictures like this. All right, and that's great and everything, but then when you go to save this, work of art, then there's nowhere to save it, right? It's just it's gone. And the thing is because there's no model, there's really no this data, the picture. It can't really be recovered in any way in this. So you just have to close it out, and there's no way to get it back. So obviously, you would not want that in a drawing application. So that's the issue with this one. All right, let's take a quick look at the view first, and I'm going to open this with Scene Builder so you can see how this is laid out. All right, so my root component is going to be an anchor pane. Inside that anchor pane, I have a split pane. Okay, so, and then on each, that's this, where you can see this middle bar, that's the split pane. And then in each, on the left part of the split pane and on the right part of the split pane, I have two anchor panes. All right, on the left one, I just have this color picker. And I believe that's under controls, yep, color picker right here. So I just literally just drag that straight in there. And over on the right anchor pane, I have a canvas. And that is in maybe miscellaneous. Yes, it's under miscellaneous. So there you can see the canvas there. Okay, and so as far as the other setup for the color chooser, I've got an FX ID for it called color chooser, and then an on action for that, handle color chooser. All right, so when the user comes in here and clicks on this drop down menu and then clicks on a color in the color chooser, it calls that handle color chooser method. All right, and then on the canvas, I've got an FX ID for it, canvas, and then yeah, there it is. I went right past it without seeing it. You can see I have a mouse event. So this is a new one. We haven't really talked about an example of this one before, but I have a mouse event, and that is on mouse dragged. All right, and so here's a method called mouse dragged. That is going to be the method in my controller, all right, that's going to get called when the user holds down the left mouse button and then drags it across this canvas. Okay. All right, so on mouse drag. So it's not an on action here, right? It's something different for this canvas. All right, so I'm going to click out of this. That's the setup. And next, let's take a look at the controller, right? All right, in the controller, I have a few things in here. I've got the current color that I keep track of, okay? I've got a graphics context and that's going to be used in conjunction with the canvas. I have an FX ID for the color picker called color chooser, and FX ID for the canvas. And here is the handle color chooser action event. Okay, so what that will do is when the user, let me go ahead and run this. When the user goes into the application, right, and then hits this drop down menu and chooses a new color, then that method gets called. All right, so that'll generate an action event. And then here I look at the color chooser and get what the color is, and I store it in this variable up here. Okay, current color. All right, then on the next one, mouse dragged. Okay, this is, you can see this is a mouse event as the parameter for this method. And so what I do is on that graphics context that I created up above there, what I do is I set the fill color on the graphics context. That's going to be the thing that interacts with the canvas. And then what I do is I draw a little tiny rectangle at the location where the user's mouse is at. Okay, like this. So set the fill color of the current color, draw a little tiny rectangle filled with that color at the place where the user's mouse is located. I guess it's 3 pixels by 3 pixels, so it's actually like a square, all right, at that location, all right. And so it makes a little tiny rectangle at that point, and so it looks like you're drawing. Okay. Down here I have an initialize method, and that sets up the graphics context that I have up here, the one for the canvas, and so that lets this know where we should be drawing. Right, we're drawing on this canvas, and then it sets the fill color to some initial color. I guess the one it starts off with when you start up the app is white, so that's why it's colored out white here, because I didn't look into how to switch it to another color. Usually it seems like most drawing applications it colors it black by default, and so that's because it's better contrast on the canvas. But anyway, I didn't spend any time figuring out how to do that. Okay. All right, so that's the basics of this. All right, and so now what we are going to do, right, is move some of this over to our model. So we're going to add a model to here so we can start saving this artwork in here. What we're going to do is, again, add a new class. I'm going to go to the application package. I am going to go to File, and then New, and then Java class. All right, and I'm going to call that Paint App Model. And that should be good enough there. All right, and so what I'm going to do is start moving some of the data over to that to this class. All right, and so some of the data that we need to be aware of for this application is the current color, right? We need to be aware of that, and then we also need to be aware of the rectangles on the canvas, right? We need to know where all those little tiny rectangles are located. And not only that, we need to know what color that they were drawn in, right? Because the user can switch colors, right? And do things like this, okay? So not all of the little tiny rectangles in there are going to be drawn the same color. Some are going to be various colors. So we need to keep track of all the rectangles, what color each rectangle is, and then what the current color is as well, okay? So those are some of the things that we're going to do in our app. So the easy thing is the color. All right, you can see I'm getting an error, right, because of the fact that it doesn't know what the color class is, so we need to import. The import is going to be javafx.scene.paint.color, so that fixes that. So that's easy. Now we know what the current color is, right? We probably are not going to need this this up here anymore, okay? All right, we're going to move that over to the Paint app model. Remember, the model is the data manager, right? So it's going to keep track of all of the information that the app needs while it's running, okay? And so then the next thing is and the more difficult thing is all the little tiny rectangles in there, okay? We need to keep track of every single one and what the color is for every single one of those. All right, so what I'm going to do in order to do that is to make a new class, an additional class. So this class is also going to be part of our model, okay? And so I'm going to go here to application, and then I'm going to go to new, and then class. All right, in this class, I'm going to call it filled rectangle. So this class is basically going to represent just one single rectangle. And for that, right, what I need to know is the color of the rectangle. I'm going to need to know where the rectangle was drawn, its location, okay? So right, again, I'm missing the import for color, so just hover over that and then import javafx.scene.paint.color. That fixes that, okay? So for each rectangle, right, I will keep track of the color that it was drawn in and the location where it was drawn. All the rectangles are 3 pixels by 3 pixels, right? So, so that's good. And then I am going to add a constructor for this. And so go to source and generate constructor using fields. So there's the constructor. And since I made these fields private, we're going to need get and set method. So go to source, generate getters and setters, and one for color, one for all right, so we'll probably need those. All right, save that. All right, so this filled rectangle class is going to represent one single rectangle, right? But in our application, we have lots and lots of little rectangles to keep track of, right? And so what we're going to do is over back in the paint model class, what we're going to do is use an array list to keep track of all of the filled rectangles. So we have basically a list of filled rectangles, and that's what we're going to keep track of. Rectangles. Okay, and I need to import for array list. All right, I am also going to create a constructor for this. So source and constructor, and I don't really need any of these in here when I create the model. But I do need to initialize that array list. So rectangles equals new array list filled rectangle. Okay, so here I'm basically just setting up the field, um, um, the array list, right, of filled rectangles. Okay. All right. So next up, I need a way to be able for the controller to add points, right? When the user is drawing on this, right? That's going to be done through the controller, right? The controller is going to get that mouse dragged event, that mouse event, right? And it's going to be, the controller is going to be updating the view, right? So it's telling the view, hey, draw a rectangle here, fill it this color, right? And so the other thing that's going to be happening there is that the controller is going to need to tell the model, hey, a new point has been drawn. You need to keep track of that new point, what color it is and where it's located, okay? And so there has to be a way for the controller to tell the model to do that. And so we're going to do that through a method called add point. And in order to add a point, we are going to all we need is where it's located. We're going to be keeping track of the current color of that's selected up here in this. So we won't need the color. That will be part of the model already. So we don't need to tell it that. Okay, and then so in the body of the method, we need to be updating this array list rectangles, and we are going to add a new filled rectangle. So we're going to create a filled rectangle object and give it the X and the Y and then the value for current color. Let's see. It's backwards. Okay. So the current color has to go first. Okay, so we are in this code going to be creating a new filled rectangle, right, object with whatever the current color is. That's what we're getting from right here. The X and the Y are going to be sent from the controller right into this method, and that will create a new filled rectangle object that will add that object to this array list, so it'll be kept track of. All right, and then let's see what else. Probably some get and set methods for the current color. So go to source and then generate getters and setters, and then for the current color we need to be able to update that at the very least. And this point this add point method will handle updating the array list of rectangles. All right, so that looks good for the model. Remember, the model is the data manager. It's for our app. It is managing, right, the current color and all of the rectangles that have been drawn over here. It's keeping track of all of those. And now that's being kept track of separately from the controller. Before, it wasn't even being kept track of. You could see the result of it on this canvas, right? But there was no part of the application was responsible for keeping track of all of that. Now that we have this set up, right, then we can write that to a disk or whatever else and start saving these pictures that people are drawing. Okay, so and then this one is different from previous examples because the model part of the application really consists of more than one class here. So remember, it can be as simple as anything as a variable, a field in a class, or many classes, or even interfacing classes that interact with the database, okay, which we'll do in the next example. All right, so the model's good. So now we just have to kind of get this back to a working state here. We move some things out, and so okay, so I'm going to close this out. All right, and so I remove this current color field because that's now going to be in the paint app model class. What I'm going to need to do is to create a color or paint app model object. Paint app model object. And that object is going to be doing the work for the model part, right? It's going to be keeping track of everything in there. So we've created that. So when the controller gets instantiated, it's going to create this paint app model, and then all of the data is going to be dumped into that paint app model there. Okay. All right. So let's go through and see how we can fix. We have some errors right here. So let's save this. All right, current color, right? It can't be resolved to a given value. All right, so we took that variable app out and put it in the paint app model. So what we're going to do is change this to updating our model. Paint app model dot set current color, and we're going to get the value. So now when the user selects a color from the color chooser or the color picker, right, what's going to happen is it's going to trigger this event, right? Then the controller is going to fish that value out of the view, right, whichever one that the user picked, and then it's going to tell the model, hey, here is the current color. So I want you to set the current color to the one that the user picked, okay? So that should fix that. Here we want the value of the current color, so we're going to have to fish that out of the paint app model. So we do paint app model dot get current color. All right, so here the user has dragged their mouse across the canvas with the mouse button, left mouse button pushed down, right? That triggers this mouse event, right, in the controller. So the controller says, hey, it goes to the model and says, hey, what's the current color? And the model gives the current color, right? And then it updates the view, right? It tells the view, hey, the current color is this, and I want you to draw a little rectangle that's filled with that color at this location, okay? All right, so now the other thing that we have to do, right, is this will draw that little, this mouse event will draw that little rectangle in there, but that rectangle, we need the controller needs to tell the model, hey, you need to keep track of this little rectangle that we drew. So in this mouse dragged event, right, what needs to happen is that the controller needs to tell the paint app model object, right, to add a point. So it needs it to add a point, and we get the X and Y location from this event, right? So that's event.getX. And event.getY. Okay. And so this sets the fill color in the view, This line of code right here actually draws the filled rectangle in the view. Then the controller, right, tells the model, hey, you got another point you need to keep track of, right? And so that adds the newly drawn point to this array list over in the model, right? So now every single point that comes through is going to come through this method. So we will have the location and the color of every single drawn rectangle in there. So when we draw this out, and that's what we get. So it's working like before. And let me see if I can just show you really quickly. I'm going to add a line here. So it's hard to see what's going on here, but I want you to see that the Paint app model is getting updated. So I'm just going to add, don't add this in here. This is just for debugging purposes. So I'm going to do system.out.println, or yeah, .println, and I'm just going to put rectangles. All right, so that line is going to be in the add point method. So every time a point gets added to the rectangle, it's going to print that in the console. Okay, and so you'll be able to, and this is in the model, right? Paint app model. So you'll see that every time we draw, or should see, right? Every time we draw a rectangle in there, that that this is getting triggered and it's drawing the array list. So let's do that. Let's run it, and we should be able to see that. Okay, so I'm going to pick a nice color, and then I'm going to click on here and drag it. So you can see I made a little mark there. So you can see it got called a few times. And you can see the first little rectangle was drawn in there, the second one, the third one, and fourth one. So you can see those points are actually they're actually in memory now, and that location is being saved. And then we can go on to do other things with that, right? It's a more permanent storage and everything. Okay. All right. And so now we have the full model view controller thing going on. The view again, right? The fxml file, the controller here is the intermediary, the director, basically directing traffic between the model and the view. And then the model is the data manager where all of the data is located. All right. All right, and that is it on this video.